Welcome back to Track Talk. Today we'll be doing 1880, which is a new game for the channel. We've been putting this off because the game tends to run pretty long and the video as a result is going to run pretty long. It's also a challenging game to comment on just because there's so many entities and it's a big game. There's just a lot to keep track of, so we'll have to see how I do. If it goes well, we'll certainly be happy to do more in the future, but this may be a little bit of an undertaking. A lot of important differences um, between this game and the 1830 family in specific, and just many other 18xx games in general. So the auction is simplified in this game. They're just going to run through each private in order, and they're all just going to bid on it until everybody passes. The map has dits, but they have these special cities that can be either a dit or a city, which is kind of fun to see. There are minor companies in this game. They call them investors, but basically just miners. The market is interesting in that it doesn't have the traditional yellow and orange zones where they don't start to your or don't count toward your stock limit. Instead, these will give you bonuses as you enter them to your revenue. And then there's a phase of the game where the stock market just freezes, so you can withhold without penalty. The most unique part of the game, however, is the stock round, operating round structure. There isn't operating rounds per se. You just run your trains in order, and then at certain points in the game, specifically when one of the last trains in a block leaves the game, either through an export or through a purchase, you'll enter a stock round. So, a lot of interesting factors to this game that will hopefully be interesting for you to watch. One other thing is that the companies have variable presidencies, so you can float a presidency at either 20 to 40% and really exceed your cert limit if you have a bunch of 40% presidencies, for instance. We'll start this game off with the auction, XOR bot, bidding 10 for the Wusong. Wusong gives you a one-time payment depending on what phase of the game you're in. Um, so not the most exciting private, but hey, if you could grab it for 10 bucks and then end up with 100, hard to beat that kind of return. So I don't think he's going to get it for 10, but very reasonable to throw a few dollars on the private. One other thing I forgot to mention was that how much money you spend in the auction is going to determine your priority and actually every player's order for the rest of the game. So you may have a little bit of an incentive to overpay, not overpay, but spend money in the auction so that you can have your first choice of minor company and your first starting company as well. We're just going to call this guy Man. We're not going to read the whole name every time. Man, he's passing. JW looks like he'll bid 15, still reasonable. Again, the return on this private could be very much worth it. Zach, he is passing as well, so it'll be coming down to XOR and JW, and JW gets it for 15. So if he waits to buy that in for 100, he'll have a pretty nice return on his investment. Of course, no private income, so early game money worth more than late. Needs to balance that risk reward. Kai Ping, boring private, just $5 of revenue. Man, he is bidding 15 for it. JW passing, Zach passing, XOR. He's feeling obligated to jump in on this just so it doesn't go for too cheap, but I don't imagine either of these players care that much about this private. They just figure it's worth a few bucks. And Man will just pass out, and XOR takes that for 20. Yanda, so this will allow players to use these shortcuts without paying the $10 deficit or penalty. So really nice for the HKR and Shanghai companies. Could be useful for some of the Beijing companies as well. And probably worth bidding this one up just a little bit. If you're running multiple companies through a ferry, or if you're starting a company early that's going to be running through the ferry, that has the potential to save you quite a bit of money over the course of the game. So we'll see it start at face, and everybody except for Man will at least put one bid down. JW, does he want this enough to bid again? He's just going to pass, and Zach probably will be taking this for 40 if I had to guess. Looks like he does. Taiwan, this one will increase the value of any routes into Taiwan about 20 bucks, which is very important in the early game because it's otherwise kind of a lackluster revenue center, but also has some value later in the game. Um, Taiwan has no value in brown and gray, so you'll at least get $20 for hitting it in those phases. However, there's much better revenue centers later in the game, so I tend to think that Taiwan becomes less important and the private becomes less important as a result. But again, maybe worth a bid just because you're trying to spend money in the auction so you can get a better company at the start of the game. Zach is going to take it for 50. X4 goes up by 10. And everybody so far is staying in. JW bucks the trend. Zach, does he really want this that much? He will pass. XOR probably, well, it might be worth an extra $10. He may stay in and he'll just pass. Okay. Um, so Man with Many Cheeses is taking it for 65 and he is currently the lead in terms of cash spent. So, I mean, it's early. All the expensive privates are coming up. Hard to read too much into that. Chinese River Ferries gives you a discount on these river tiles, mostly in the west of the map and also in the south. Not a very great private, I wouldn't say. Starting to get more expensive and less of a return. XOR bidding 90. Man bidding 95. JW is staying in. Zach, does he want to just pass out here? He does. And XOR also passing. He feels like he's price enforced by starting at $20 higher than face. Man, he passes, and JW is going to win that. So now we start to get into the more exciting privates, the privates that are a little bit more worth bidding up, in my opinion. I don't know how to pronounce this one. We'll just call it the engineer. This gives you a phase D building permit. So, for instance, let's say you start your first company with a 40% permit, and you have a ability to build only in the A phase, which is very early in the game. You could potentially have this private and put it back into your early game company so that it can lay some late game track for itself. I think that that is potentially useful, not necessarily that specific scenario, but having a free uh, permit is useful. Um, Generally speaking, you end up running 3, maybe 4 companies in this game. So you can always have a company build track for your other companies. Um, but if they end up getting tokened out, or if you have to start them far away from one another and they're not able to lay synergistic track, this D permit could still be a nice safety valve for you. So he's going to start at face, and Jay Weist is just passing. Zach is happy to jump in for 20 bucks more, and XOR is passing as well. So we'll see if Man wants to bid this up any more than he already has, and he just passes. Goes for 120. I think that's a very reasonable price, maybe even a little bit on the cheap side. The Imperial King, not sure how to pronounce that, comes with a president of the BCR. BCR is going to start in the southwest in Chengdu. And this company is usually really good because it's going to be basically guaranteed to start. And it has the ability to lay 2 tracks from the beginning of the game. So it's going to be able to run its trains for longer routes earlier than the other companies, and it just is able to really set up nice long game end game routes for itself early. Um, BCR and the Rocket, which is the next private, seems like it would be pretty strong, but you have to worry that if you spend too much for both these privates, you're going to have par the BCR pretty low, and other players will just buy your shares. So it might be hard to pull it off, but if you were able to do it somehow, I think that would be pretty strong start. So the Queen is probably undervalued in this game in terms of its uh, face value. Probably worth quite a bit more than this, and we'll see if the players are going to bid this up. It gives you 2 shares, so if you par the shares high enough, you're getting $200 of value for only 160. So probably worth at least that much, maybe more. Bids 160. And looks like everybody is going to be staying in on this. So is this the first time we've seen all 4 players on an auction? I think so. And now players are dropping, and it goes up to 195. So if he pars at 100, he gets um, a $5 bonus just for buying the private. And he does. It's also important that there are only so many par slots at each value. So locking up that $100 slot is going to prevent other players from getting high value companies, big treasuries later in the game when they need those permanent trains. This is the first par or float that we've seen in the game. So just going to point out that he has a choice of an ABC or BCD permit. This will determine what part of the game he's building in, either early or late. And I think it's a very hard choice to pick the BCD. Um, the whole benefit of the BCR is that it's able to start early and lay a lot of track. But if you don't pick an A permit, you're not going to be able to do anything with the company. So I don't think I've ever seen someone not pick the ABC. Um, and we'll just confirm that he has. He has. So no surprises there. As it stands right now, Man will be going first in the first stock round, followed by Zach, followed by JW, followed by XOR. So if anybody wants to change that, they're going to need to pay and potentially pay quite heavily for the rocket. For instance, if Zach got this for 100 or more, he may be able to contend with Man for his choice of company. However, Man already has a company, so if someone was to go first, maybe the other players don't mind it being him because he's a little less likely to pick up another company. Um, all right, so Rocket gives you a train, and you can run this train in your very first operating round rather than falling back, which because of the way the market is structured with these bonus payments can be very, very strong. Probably one of, if not the best private in the game, maybe just be strictly the best. And definitely worth more than $50 since you're guaranteed to get at least a $100 train by buying this. So Zach is going to start it at face. No way that this goes for face. XOR going up by 5. Man with many cheese. He's spent too much money in the auction already, and it's just going to be passing. I don't know if it's fair to say he spent too much, but he's happy with the amount he's spent. Is the way I'll phrase that. JW, he's bidding for 75. And Zach is actually passing. I don't know. I think paying, 80, $90 for this private is still an excellent value. So probably I would have stayed in longer. XOR, he's bidding 80. JW. So it's basically the 2 players that have spent the least in the auction are still in right now, and they're going to be hoping to move a little bit earlier in priority. Going up to 90, 95, 100. So now this is the value of a 2 train. But still, the fact that you wouldn't fall back makes it worth paying above the face value of the train, in my opinion. And he will get it for 100. So basically, just buying a 2 train early, potentially with this private. Man with many cheeses is going to lead us off, and then Zach XOR has managed to leapfrog above JW in terms of priority deal. And now all the players are going to be picking their minor companies, their foreign investors. The foreign investors are not my favorite part of the game. I tend to not enjoy minor companies in general. I think they just kind of slow things down and make it a little bit boring. But many games have this kind of mechanic, so can't complain too much. BCR, operating in the Southwest, oftentimes synergizes pretty well with the French investor. French investor is going to be laying track that the BCR can then take advantage of. And of course, it's easy to link these up. When you link up with your investor, you get the treasury of the investor into your company, and you also get a share in your company as well as a $50 bonus. So there's some tension in the game about when you want to do that. You can merge in very late, right before the 4 trains come out, and get a huge influx of cash, or you can merge in earlier if your company's paying very well for that extra share. And early in the game, $50 goes a lot more, goes a lot further towards buying shares than later in the game. So I think that basically, as long as you have a plan, you can take good advantage of it, regardless if you buy it in early or late. You just have to plan ahead for that strategy. Anyway, all a long way of saying that the BCR player probably will be taking the French investor, which is what he does. Zach Chillman, he's got the ferry and the permit. So with the ferry, he may be looking to take advantage of that with some East Coast cities, specifically the HKR, and he's going to be going second in priority. So he has a pretty good expectation that he'll be able to start the Shanghai company, and as a result, he may look towards the I forget what investor this is. This is Germany. It is, and I guess in theory could look at the Japanese investor as well, but that's a little bit harder of a sell. Alternatively, could look to head down south towards Portugal or Britain. But if I have to guess, I would say probably German, just to get quick runs um, up to the north. And he does that. XOR, he has the rocket and then the kind of worthless private. So hard to predict what he's going to do. If he's looking to take advantage of the rocket, he needs to make sure that he takes a company that is able to operate and run a train in the first OR. So, for instance, if you take the BZU, you're not going to be running that company in the first OR, even if you have a train. So, for that reason, at least in my opinion, it would be a bad decision to take that company. Um, so we can look at the map and try and see which privates, or sorry, which miners would synergize with a company that will be running early. So all the Beijing companies can run early as long as the jig is paired with the Belgian investor. Um, Otherwise, all the other companies can run without the help of an investor. So if he wanted to take the jig, he could take that investor. This investor's been spoken for. This one, I don't think it really is very helpful. Not going to help the JHU, and could help the QSR. So if you have if you have this investor in the QSR, you could start that and run in the first operating round. QSR, because it's starting on one of these double O tiles, which you can't run multiple trains from. One of these. Probably not the best starting company. So I don't imagine we'll be seeing him take the Japanese or Belgian investors. Now down south, all these foreign investors end up being pretty good usually. Um, the CKR can run in the first operating round if it has the French investor, but this one's already been taken, so probably won't see him take the CKR. Um, the SCR cannot run, um, and most of these other companies are not going to be running either. I think the only other one that we haven't talked about is the LHR, which can run in the first operating round and doesn't require a private or a miner to do it. So I don't really know what investor he's going to take. It's not clear based on his privates, and his strategy may be determined based on what he picks here. He picks the Portuguese investor down in Macau. Um, so there's a couple companies that could work with this, but they're all usually a little bit slower to link up. CKR could work. Wuhan, probably not the SCR for the same reason that the QSR is not a great first company. Even the NJR could eventually get down there. So he's leaving some options open, I think. JW has the cheap blocker and then the river company. So any of his companies are going to be able to function down here in the south pretty well. And again, just like for XOR, I think his privates have left him open or left him options. The one thing that he needs to be a little bit worried about is that he's going to have three players operating before him. So if he has his heart set on a specific company, may be disappointed. So he will take the Russian investor, which is all the way up here in the north, one we haven't talked about. Could synergize with the BZU. Going to take a while for them to lay really good track. And by that, I mean the Trans-Siberian Railroad. I think you need at least a 3+3 to actually start running that, depending on how your track develops. I guess in theory you could get there with a 3, but that's not usually the way the track develops. Um, so more likely a 3 plus 3. All right, we'll go into the stock round. Man has already parred the BCR. BCR is a good company, may just want to buy his own shares. Does have the option of parring a second 20% company, but needs to be a little bit worried that other players will just buy his shares and leech off him with that kind of strategy. So I imagine he just buys another BCR here. And he does. Zach, first or second company to par. He has the Ferry. So again, I think he's going to be taking the HKR here. It just synergizes very well, and I think he telegraphed that with his investor selection. He does take the HKR, has a decision to make about the presidency. He actually parred it too high to take a 40% presidency. 40% presidencies are very tempting because of the share density and the fact that nobody's going to be able to cross invest in your company. But the permit is really going to kneecap a company if you're not careful there. He does have the engineers, which could help out, but he's going to have to be sitting um, quiet for the B and C phases. So it's definitely a risky strategy. So I don't hate that he's you know locking himself out from that possibility. Does secure himself a $100 par, which is important. Going to have a nice treasury. And let's see what presidency picks. Not unreasonable to pick a 30% presidency. Could take an AB permit and then just sit out for the C and then put the D permit in there. He does take the 30 and a AB permit. Okay. XOR. So I'm curious to see where he wants to go. Um, he needs to be careful that he picks a company that can actually run the rocket. Um, and there are $100 pars available to him, but he has a interesting opportunity to par at 90 and get a 40% presidency. Again, a little bit risky because he may not be able to lay very much track, but he would prevent anybody else from investing in his rocket company, which is usually a very good revenue company, at least until the second 50% of the company opens up in green potentially. So he does par at 90 and he takes the checker or the CKR, which could be a good company, but he doesn't have this investor. Who has the French investor? That is BCR. So unless the BCR is, well, unless man is feeling generous, which I don't think you should be basically ever in 18xx, the CKR is not going to have a run to take advantage of the rocket. Um, the CKR does eventually link up with a Portuguese investor, um, so reasonable there. But yeah, he's going to be potentially in some trouble. Um, I probably would have liked to see him start something in Beijing, assure that he has a run, and then just gradually make his way down to Portugal. Um, hmm. All right. Let's see if he takes that 40% presidency. Exciting to see that if he does, but kind of high risk, high reward. So taking a 30% presidency, splitting the difference. This will allow someone to buy a share in the rocket company if they want it. But again, if it's not running early, which as of right now, it's probably not, makes the company, just a normal company basically. And he takes a AB permanent as well. Last company or last player, um, he has the Rivers, so has a lot of options in terms of companies. And he will take the JHA. JHA is one of the good Beijing companies, and it's running north. So he has the Russian investor. Maybe I should have seen that coming actually. And he takes a $100 par, so probably a 30% presidency for him. Oh, okay. He's just going to take a 20%, and then he will have to buy his shares in the next round of this stock round. He probably will be taking the ABC presidency or ABC permit, and he does. Man with many cheeses has one more share to buy. Could buy his BCR, um, and I think I probably would. The BCR is going to be running pretty well, I think. So he has no competition for the BCR now. XOR can only afford his own checker, which he's happy to pick up. And Jay Weist can buy either Hacker or JJ. And he will take a, let me just go to the entities. So it looks like he bought his own Hacker. Okay. And now, before we enter the next operating round, just an aside, I'll point out that we spent 25 minutes talking about the game already, and we're just into the first operating round. Um, Granted, I've been going slow and giving some context for various rules, but this is going to be a record-setting video, I think. Into the first operating round, we have the minor companies operating Russian investor, probably looking to eventually get over to Vladivostok, um, but is going to take a very long time to do it. And we'll see where he wants to lay. He is cooperating with the JHA, so could also start laying south for an early link up. But I imagine eventually wants to set himself up for a Trans-Siberian run. And he's just heading straight east for now. We'll see how that develops. Oops, sorry, I skipped the German investor. And probably laying a straight city down into this ferry to help the hacker. And does. Portugal, a little bit hard to predict where he's heading. Doesn't need to rush over the CKR. It's going to take a while for them to link up anyways. So has some options here. Looks like he's heading over there for now. Does have some expensive track to lay to get there. And the French down south. So this is an important decision more for XOR than for Man, because the French company will eventually get over the BCR, but the question is, does he help the CKR run early? And there's really no reason to do that. He has no shares in that company, and it would just be strictly benefiting his opponent to do that. So really hope we don't see that. And laying not towards the CKR and just eventually heading over to the BCR. We'll see how the CKR wants to play this. I think he's in a bad position already. BCR laying 2 yellow tracks, upgrading his home, and then he lays the double, I guess, medium city, this type of tile with dits. Dits in this game don't upgrade. Sorry, they do upgrade, but the value doesn't increase. But these double dits don't upgrade at all. So he has laid track that is going to kneecap the CKR, at least in yellow, because now the CKR cannot really expect to run north towards the BCR to cooperate. It's going to be forced to lay some expensive track basically anywhere he goes other than towards the offboard, which probably the BCR player would be happy to have him head to the offboard, because that's going to help the French company develop track as well. 2 trains in this game tend to last a long time. There's a ton of them, and they are pretty cheap, so could be looking to pick up at least 2 here, potentially even 3. He could lay 2 tracks, get into Chongqing, and token there to run all 3 trains in the next stock round, or in the next time he operates. I have to be careful not to talk about operating rounds, since there's not really operating rounds in this game. Buys 2 2 trains, 3 2 trains, so I think he's going to take that exact strategy probably. Hacker laying Shanghai. Shanghai has an extra $10 compared to regular cities, and probably running up towards his German investor. If he does that, he will have technically connected, which will be a very early connection, not going to get much value from the treasury of the German investor, but can take advantage of the track lay, and will get an extra pay of the extra share of the HKR, which has the potential to be a pretty high revenue company. So not unreasonable to do it, but there is a downside. He does do that, so the next time the German operator, German investor operates, it will be going away. He buys 2 2 trains. JHA, one of the Beijing companies, has one of these interesting tiles to lay, can decide whether it's a dit or a city, and we'll pick a dit. I wonder why you do that. I guess you don't have to worry about, securing a token there later in the game. but it is going to limit your revenue later in the game since this is only going to be $20, whereas a city could get up to what, 40 or is it 50? Um, 40, and then in gray could be 50. So losing some money there, but maybe a little bit of a safer play in terms of being tokened out or allowing other players to get tokens right around Beijing. Probably just buying a single two train here. Not going to be able to run more than one for a while. And then the checker, this company is not looking great. We'll see where he wants to head. And as mentioned, not going to be able to run the rocket, so could take it in, but at this point, if you're not able to run it, may want to just get a higher value train, save it for a four, for instance, get yourself a $300 train rather than a $100 train. But the major advantage of this private is to not fall back here and race to the right so that you can get those bonus revenues, and he's not going to be able to do it. He lays towards into China and then also looking to link up with the dits laid by the BCR. So maybe going to be okay. The BCR could block him from getting there. Um, but I think the BCR has shown that he's probably wanting to head to Chongqing. So I think the Checkar is going to be pretty safe in assuming he's going to have access to this double dit. And probably should just buy 1-2 train here because I don't think he's going to be able to run more than one, which is what happens. So we are running through the order again. The next stock round is going to happen when 3 of these 2 trains are bought or if nobody buys them. And we may well see nobody buy them. So we might enter a stock round after the CKR. There's a nice little mechanic here that shows you where the next stock round is currently going to happen. So we'll keep an eye on that. The Russian investor probably continuing to head east and is going to head east but southeast, get itself into another city, maybe telegraphing that he's looking to eventually start the BZU to synergize with the JHA and run 2 companies with the Trans-Siberian. The German investor is going to be going away. Where does he want to lay track for the last time? Has 2 options. Could like to head over towards Beijing. Alternatively, could take another ferry. Rushing over to Beijing is not unreasonable. Could hope to start the JHU early and then get the JHU down into Shanghai and the hacker up into this city, secure good runs from 2 major revenue centers for 2 companies. He is instead heading towards the ferry. Not entirely sure where that's going to ultimately end him up. And now he's losing his minor. So he'll end up with another share and a few extra dollars into the next stock round, which is going to allow him to buy some paying shares. XOR and Man with Many Cheeses are going to struggle to invest their cash at the end of the stock round potentially. So Portuguese investor probably just heading over towards the checker still, and is the French company could just look to link up with the BCR early here. BCR could lay this track, and the French Indochina investor would go away in the next operation if that were to occur. He's not going to be able to take that money, unfortunately, with him into the first stock round. It doesn't look like because the stock round should happen first, unless someone delays it by buying a 2 train. So it looks like he is looking to link up early with the BCR. And we will see the BCR. What does he want to do now? So instead of heading over to Chongqing, he could lay here and token here to run all of his trains, or even token on Nanning. And then he could lay a nasty double dit here to hurt the checker. Maybe that would be better. Can hurt your opponent and still accomplish what you want by doing that. So he does link up and doesn't block the checker. Um, okay. Does he drop a token? He's going to have to if he wants to run it. So he does, and he drops it right next door to the checker. Running 3 trains, and he's paying for 120. HKR, he is upgrading towards this 00 city. QSR is going to eventually start there, so he's not going to be able to lay any tokens there until that company starts, and may not be able to determine where his token ends up until Brown when it merges. Does drop a token in this city, which will allow him to run both of his 2 trains. And he's paying for 90. JHA, continuing to head north, going to have a run of only 40, but setting himself up for the Trans-Siberian in the future. And he buys a 2 train, which is going to delay the stock round potentially, which is good news for everyone not named Zach, because everybody was not going to have any cash in the next stock round to buy shares. So Zach would have gotten 1, maybe 2 shares ahead of probably just 1 share. So probably the right move from JW if he was hoping to have a 2 train anyways. This is one of the things to think about in this game is that, yeah, you can buy a bunch of trains early and expect to run them, down the road. But if you buy them piecemeal, you're extending the game and allowing your company to, or all the companies really, to run for a little bit longer. CKR, be curious to see if he operates towards French Indochina or towards these double dits. Um, Not going to be able to hit French Indochina, so maybe he just wants to secure his run by laying there. Has to pay terrain either time. Actually, there's no terrain cost here, so if that's a concern of his, may lay towards the west. And does lay towards French Indochina, only with a 2 train, not going to be able to hit it, as mentioned. So running for 40 and leaving himself vulnerable to being blocked here until green. Actually, being blocked here for the rest of the game since this tile won't upgrade. Risky. He pays for 40, and we're into the next go around. The game was extended by the JHA buying that train, which again helped everyone have money for shares now, whereas before only Zach was really going to be buying a share. Russian investor laying the BZU home and eventually going to be linking up with the JHA. The Macau or the Portuguese have no track that they can lay and are just going to be operating. And the French investor also has no track, so just going to be running its train. BCR, let's see here. Oh, sorry, the French investor is going away. So Man with Many Cheeses is going to get another share and the BCR. And the BCR should be running for the most. It is by a pretty fair margin. Of course, this will change early, but he's going to appreciate having this share when it operates coming up. He transfers the money in the BCR. We didn't talk about that, but I believe both players took the money into their companies rather into their personal treasuries. BCR running 3 2 trains, and the only valid track for him is to lay this track. So if you're going to do it, I think you probably want to be mean to the checker and block it, which he does. When this track upgrades later in the game, he could potentially have 2 runs into French Indochina, reasonable revenue center. And one thing I didn't notice is that he actually put his token on the minor company's start. That is something I don't like. He is going to be able to run a little bit better, just marginally better, in the early game because this is a $30 city as opposed to $20 cities, which you'd otherwise be running. But is $20, for 1 or 2 operations worth losing your third and last token for the rest of the game? And I think the answer to that is no. So I don't like that. But funnily enough, he's going to be running circles around the CKR train, at least in yellow. He's got it totally boxed in. And he is only laying the one track for now, and presumably is going to be running two trains out of French into China. Otherwise, that token makes no sense. Looks like he is, so he's going to increase his run by 20 bucks. Again, probably not worth the token, but he'll have a little bit more cash in the next stock round. Hacker could lay the double O city here. Alternatively, may look to start heading south or even linking up with the NJR. Could float the NJR and have two good companies. So it looks like he is going to do that. And running for 90 again, which he pays. He buys a third two train. So this is going to extend the early game even longer unless somebody wants to buy that last two train. So for instance, if the JHA were to buy that train, it's going to prevent the checker from operating, which would be really brutal because he already is falling behind. I don't know that the JHA wants 3-2 trains though. Um, he could eventually token this city here and then run towards the dip to run all 3 true trains. So it wouldn't be terrible for him, um, but also very reasonable to not buy it and just wait for the 2+2s. I will say though, if he buys it, then his investor is going to be running a 2+2, which is going to be an extra 20 bucks for it as it hits the dip. So we'll see. He lays the city and is going to eventually be upgrading into the Russian investor. So I think you probably do buy the two train here, as you're going to be able to lay a token and get some pretty good runs. And that's going to really hurt XORBot potentially. So he buys it, and everyone's able to buy shares except for XOR. So that's kind of the doomsday scenario for that player, I think. Man with many cheeses can buy 2 shares. Can't buy any of his BCR, but good news for him is that nobody else can either. And there's actually not that many shares available. So that's something I neglected to, I guess, note is that, Jay triggered a stock round and he has cash for shares, but there's only 2 shares available, and the first 2 players in priority are going to snap them up. So that's actually not as good play as I thought. He probably should have waited, unless one of these players floats another company. But there's only $100 par left, and buying another 20% presidency, maybe not the most um, safe play long term. So I think we'll just see paying shares bought here rather than another company floating. You could float it lower. A $70 par, for instance, for Man would allow him to buy a 30% presidency. Um, and actually, Zach could do that as well. He could do that at 80. So I guess we could see that happen. And JW better hope that that does happen, or else he's not going to be buying any shares. Man is just buying a paying share. Zach also buying a paying share. So everybody else is out of luck. Bad timing for a stock round for 2 of the players. This leaves XORBot with priority into the next stock round. And now he's operating again, but has no track delay and is just going to be running for 40. Pretty bad. He does buy a 2+2, but again, well, at least he'll be able to run into the offboard for a few extra dollars, but he's only going to be running one of those trains. The Russian investor running a 2+2 as well, so we'll be running for a few extra dollars, 60 instead of 40, it looks like. And he doesn't lay any tracks, so not looking to link up with the JHA just yet. If the JHA lays this track, however, he still will be going away. The Portuguese investor has no track and is just running. BCR could lay this track, but may also just be happy to sit on the current situation. No competition for that track just yet. So he's just going to save his cash and continue to pay for the most money of any of the companies. And he's the sole investor in this. So he's really happy with the status quo right now. It's to the other players' benefit to shake things up here. and prevent him from just running away with the game. HKR running 3 trains does have 3 runs. Could look to lay track for the Nanjing company. Does pay some terrain to do it, and is not going to be able to run that track for now, but if he has priority, he may be able to start that company early. Zach is going to be going last in priority, so maybe doesn't want to lay its track for it. Instead, we'll lay the double O. This helps the QSR potentially, and he's not able to hit that track. So running for 140 equal to the BCR, that's good. And does he buy a 2+2? He does not. JHA could lay this city here and make his private go away, his minor go away, and does. So a little bit surprised that the Russian passed that. I guess it doesn't matter at the end of the day, but still a little bit surprising. Running 3 trains, and he's paying for 120, so just slightly worse than the BCR and the HKR. And the CKR has no track, and it's going to be running for just, what is it, $70, I think. Yes. Final operation of the Russian, and he has no track, so he links up with the JHA, and he puts all of his cash into the treasury of the JHA. So everybody's linking up pretty early here. They're not going to have a ton of free cash for more expensive trains later in the game. You know, sometimes players will wait until their private has, or their minor has like $500, but everyone so far is getting $200 or less. Does have the option of taking this token, and we saw the BCR do that. I think that he should not do that here, and he does. I don't know why they're making these decisions to do this. It seems short-sighted. I'd much rather have that token available for later in the game to mess with someone else or secure a run somewhere more important. These off-board tokens just seem very underwhelming to me. Portuguese doing nothing, and we're back to the BCR, now running 4 trains. Let's just see where the stock round sits. Okay, so actually, good we checked, because if BCR doesn't buy a train here, which he's train locked, he can't, we will be seeing another stock round. So BCR player, all the players have cash for multiple shares, so we'll be seeing something float because there's nothing for them to invest in. And XWarbot, unfortunately, still falling further behind with no cash for shares, no ability to float. So running 4 trains, does this mean he's now motivated to lay this track? Probably not. And he's running for 270 now, getting half of that, which is pretty monstrous. And we are into the next stock round. Does Jay Weist want the $40? Would put him up to 320. I don't know that he cares. May want to hold on to this for more payment later in the game. XOR is going to have to pass. And Jay Weist can float something here. Could float a 30% presidency at 90, for instance. But it's not going to have anywhere to put his cash if he doesn't do that. So he takes the NJR. This is that company that we were talking about, is right next to the HKR, and has its track already kind of set up for it. So very reasonable to pick that. Does need to be a little bit careful that the JHU and the QSR don't token it out somewhere. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but he has all this pre-laid track that I'm sure he's trying to take advantage of, and it would be a shame if green opens up in the wrong spot, so to speak, and one of these players is able to upgrade and token. So he's going to pick a 30% presidency and takes probably a BC permit. Where is this company? BC, yep. Man with many cheeses may also look to float a company here. I don't imagine he's eager to buy shares in the NJR, which is going to be falling back at least once. So if he's picking a company to coordinate with his BCR, could take the JIG, could take the NXR, the winner. Yeah, maybe taking a Beijing company. In green, could look to lay track rather rapidly towards the BCR. and he takes the JHU. So JHU is not as easy to get down to the BCR with, but does have all this track. And this is the scenario that the NJR president needed to be a little bit worried about, is that if you see these two companies floating, we're going to have a lot of competition for tokens along this East Coast. JHU, a very good company, and he will par that at 90 with a 30% presidency. And I assume he also takes a BC permit. He does. All right, so Zach Chillman also with cash to par a company, and he could par this. He could also par it at 90 if he wants, which would be the last $90 slot. And I'll just point out that this is all terrible news for XOR, who only has $85, so he still has no shares that he can buy. Zach is going to par the QSR, so that's the third company on this East Coast here. This is going to be a very hotly contested area of the map, it looks like, at least when greens open up. So he is parring at 90. He will be operating behind all these other companies. And just looking at this, the BCR cannot buy a three train. The HKR could, which would open up green. And then the first player to operate would be the NJR. So NJR is going to be forced to link up. He's not going to be able to upgrade and secure a token where, let's see, the JHU and the QSR are operating in that order. The QSR, if he tokens here, could potentially upgrade and token in Qingdao. So that's the company that I would be worried about as the NJR president. Regardless, we'll see the QSR. And actually, that's probably why he picked that company, because he has the hacker, so he could secure 2 tokens in that tile and save both of his company's runs. Parring for 30, taking a BC presidency. Yep, so all 3 players kind of thinking along the same lines. Man with Many Cheeses has enough money for another share, should buy one here, which will give Zach priority into the next stock round. And he buys his own JHU. Okay, QSR, first one to operate. Somehow I misread the operating order, because I thought that we were going to be starting at HKR, or BCR technically. Oh, I see. QSR is just laying his token. He's not actually operating. Okay. So it does link up with this track and should be able to secure a token on Qingdao if he wants it. And we should be back to the BCR now. BCR didn't buy any trains, so now we're with the HKR. And HKR is going to pass any track. A little bit surprised that he doesn't upgrade for the QSR. So for instance, could upgrade Qingdao, secure that token with the QHR or QSR, and he would have a little bit more revenue with that if he did it. Probably doesn't want to upgrade Shanghai and open up a token slot for the Ninja. So reasonable not to upgrade that one, but why not upgrade this one? Running 3 trains, pays it out for 190 now. He's getting a bonus now that he's in yellow. All the companies have been getting that. I missed that. And why is the BCR a round ahead of everyone? He must have not have. Oh, I see. He's just the only company that's operated. He's not actually ahead. Okay. I thought that he had somehow managed to operate one more time, but he fell back just like everybody else. So HKR, he's paying, moving to the right. JHA, no real track for him. Nobody's bought a 3 train yet. And he's going to be just paying for 170. He buys the 3s, so everybody's gotten the other half of their capital, or not everyone, but all the first floated companies. And we will see probably a rush on the 3 trains now. CKR does have access to green track, but unfortunately for him, doesn't have an easy way to link up with anywhere just yet, because he's been blocked with his only terminus with that double dip. So probably upgrading his home and then hoping to play nice with the BCR. A lot of kind of delayed gratification for this company. So did he have an option to leave himself with more spokes? So is there a X? Well, actually, he's just in bad He's just in a bad spot because even if he upgraded with an X city, he'd be blocked on one of the spokes. So no matter what he picks, he's only going to have one out into the BCR track, and that's directly east. BCR could block this if he was wanting to play hardball, which would put the checker even further behind. So upgrading his home, running for 90, and he pays. Ninja, first new company to operate, laying towards the L14 track, I'm sure, and does. Also gets a second city for himself, so eventually going to be heading north through there. And he buys a 3 for sure here. JHU, he is actually not going to be competing with the QSR and the hacker, going to be heading down south, maybe looking to eventually head towards the BCR. And he buys a 3 as well. 3 trains are flying off the shelves. May see a stock round soon, but the BCR is not going to be able to buy the last one, so we would be looking probably at the hacker to buy that. QSR should upgrade in token on Qingdao, I think. Instead, upgrading towards Dallin and not dropping any token. So, I guess he could token with both of his companies here and get a run into Beijing with them. Not sure. I was expecting a token on this city. He buys the second to last 3. He did have the option of actually triggering a stock round there. Would that have been to his benefit? Probably. He could buy a share. BCR player could not. Everybody could buy a share besides the BCR player, who I think is in the lead here. So maybe he wanted to buy 2-3 trains there and trigger a stock round. The private, last remaining private, could look to upgrade Nanning here, but still it's not going to link up with the checker just based on that. He does do the upgrade, so may see the last minor company going away. And he has a pretty healthy treasury. He's been running for much longer than everybody else, 280. BCR running 4 trains. Big question to me is, does he upgrade unfriendly track? So basically, either this tile or this tile rather than doing something like this. And he's going to play friendly. I don't know why he does that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it gets him anything. And it's very beneficial to his opponent. Okay, well, he will run for 340, a monstrous run. And again, he's the sole investor in the company, so pulling further ahead. HKR, we'll see. Does he lay a token now? Also, where is this stock round going to be occurring? As a result of that monster run, BCR player has cash for shares again, so entering the stock round now may be less attractive than it was a moment ago. But he could buy a 3. Probably does want to buy a 3, or else he's going to be a little bit in danger with just 2 trains. Upgrading the tile I expected him to, and is going to have a much better run than he did last time. Paying for 220. And he does buy the 3. So I think Jay Weist is the loser in this scenario. His company didn't get to operate, and he has the least cash as a result. XORBot finally will be able to pick up shares, and Jay Weist may need to take his Wusong here to have enough cash to buy a share. Could pick up 2 shares of these newly floated companies if he does this. So he does. Zach Chillman going to have his choice of companies, and the BCR is now available. The 4 trains are not on the immediate horizon, so these 2 trains are going to be running probably at least once more. As a result, I think you look towards the BCR. Could buy your own hacker, but the BCR is running better, so if they're the same price, I think you invest there. He is buying a QSR. That's surprising. QSR with a single train is cheap. So maybe just buying that for now, realizing that he can get a more secure presidency and then buy the BCR later. XOR, he buys a BCR. That's going to be his only share. Jay Weist buying a hacker as well, or not as well, but buying a hacker. So interesting that he prioritizes that over the BCR. I think the BCR is probably the strictly better investment, at least for now. Man, I imagine he buys his own BCR and does. Zach Gilman, he is buying the QSR IC. So he wanted to make sure that his treasury got the second half. So that's why he's buying those shares. Missing out on the BCR to do it though. I guess he could sell his QSR and then go back and buy the BCR. Xoverbot and Jay Wee's passing. Man with many cheeses. One more share for him. Could buy his own JHU. JHU usually ends up being a pretty good company. And he does. So the JHU is also getting the rest of his treasury. Is Zach going to just pass here and keep priority? He does. And everyone else is passing. Okay. So I was questioning the QSR buys, but it makes perfect sense. JHA does have green track now. Could look to upgrade this city and start heading over to Vladivostok to set up for that Trans-Siberian run. And looks like he's going to be doing that. Running 4 trains and running for 260. Checker has been given a gift by the BCR, able to run 2 of his trains. And he is going to be actually giving himself a run. I see. So I missed this in my analysis. He actually did have 2 outs. He was able to upgrade to give him a south exit as well. So he's going to be able to take advantage of his 2+2 train and hit a bunch of these dits. And he exchanges the rocket for a 3+3. That's interesting. A 3+3 is a $300 train, and I guess it runs better than a 4, so yeah, why not? This is going to cause all these companies to discard trains. The BCR and the hacker have already gotten runs for them, so they're not too upset. But the JHA, actually the JHA also got a run out of it, so okay. Everybody's discarding the 2s, and Checker is train locked, but he does lay a second tile. And is going to have 3 trains run now. So he has pretty good revenue now. But he's got a big deficit to come back from, I think. Running for 330, and he pays. The NJR probably upgrades Shanghai here and then gets some tokens to mess with the QSR. He gets that token. So the QSR had, I think, a couple opportunities to prevent this, but has missed out on it. So not going to be getting into Shanghai and is now in a little bit of pressure for the token into Beijing as well. That might have been a mistake. Running for just 80, and he actually withholds. So don't often see players withhold before communism here. Surprised that he's doing this. Will allow him to afford a 3+3 train. But I think there were probably ways to do this by shuffling trains out of the JHA, for instance. That may come back to bite him. Very important in this game to rush right to get these bonus to your shares. I mean, hard to get that $40 bonus early, obviously, impossible early, but hard to get it really ever. But if you can get a $15 bonus during communism, that is a lot of money. So hurts to hold back. Buys the 3+3. JHU now. He is upgrading Beijing, going to improve his run a little bit. And probably just going to let the other players upgrade this city for him. There's 3 companies that are all trying to head into Beijing, so almost certainly that track will be eventually upgraded. QSR does upgrade there. Does he token there? Passing for now. So could be tokened out by the NJR. Probably not going to be the hackers. It's the same presidency. He's running a 3 train. Cannot hit Beijing because he didn't token. So only be running for 90, and he does not buy a 3+3. So looking at this, we have 2 trains left, and the next stock round looks like it's going to be happening on the JHU. So we may just see us go all the way back down to the JHU. A lot of these companies are cert locked. Last run of the Portuguese investor. Finally, the minor companies are going away. and he takes $440 into the checker. He he also takes the token. Okay, at least it's not an off-board token, so no problem with this. BCR running 3 trains now, going to be running for less, and he upgrades his home and is running for 290, so isn't running for that much worse than he would have with 4 trains. Hacker also had to discard a train, and he is upgrading his other city's home and not placing a token. So again, this access to Beijing is in danger. Does have 3 trains and is running for 280. JHA, he is continuing to upgrade just for incremental gains here. And let me just look at his routes here. Is he even using this token? He's not. So already this token has become kind of irrelevant. And we're just in operating round 4. Yeah, I don't know. I think this token is a little bit more valuable. In theory, you can run 2 trains out of a $60 revenue center, whereas this token, just running 1 train, um, I guess with a lot of work could get 2 Trans-Siberians, but seems unlikely. And you could do 2 Trans-Siberians with one of these other tokens too. Just have to build your track for that. Checker running 3 trains has pretty good track and better trains than the other players who are still stuck with these 2s. So he's going to be running for a lot of revenue. He is upgrading towards Taiwan and maybe also looking to head towards Shanghai. This is going to put some pressure on the Ninja running for 380, which he pays. Ninja, he is maybe looking to get into Beijing from the south. And running for 210, which he pays. JHU. Now he can link up. Well, I don't know where he's going. Is he looking to head down to Shanghai from the south now that he's been tokened out at Qingdao? Could be. But he's not going to necessarily have access to this city. Unlikely that he'll be tokened out. Hacker and Ninja would both have to token there. So probably is secure in his guess that he will be able to token there. Not doing it just yet, and running for 240, which he pays. So the 3s are gone, and we're into stock round 5. Game is halfway over. We are over an hour into the stream, so yep, we will be looking at a 2.5-hour stream probably. Zach Chillman, he is the cash trailing player in terms of cash, and could look to start a third company here. The $90 and $100 pars are almost gone. He may want to start a 30% presidency at 100. Both of his current presidencies are secure, so he has the hacker and the QSR. If he were to start a company, who would he start? Could be the SCR, could be the winner. Alternatively, could start another Beijing company. Wouldn't be hard for him to take advantage of this yellow track and start heading south through this 00. We'll see. He's instead going to buy a paying share of the checker. Company's running pretty great right now, and that 2 train is going to rust, but he's going to have 2 other trains still. So reasonable purchase. XORBot is floating the winner, and he takes the last $100 slot. So Zach Shellman missed his opportunity there, and the winner and the checker, yeah, some possibility for synergistic track. Maybe better for Zach to have taken that than leaving it open to XOR. Does he buy a BC permit? So many companies, hard to see where they are. Yes, he does. Okay. Jay Weist, he's buying paying shares. Man with many cheeses, leader by a fair margin, both in stocks and cash. He is floating the BZU. Okay, so this is interesting. He's going to be piggybacking off all the hard work of the JHA and just teleporting into all this track. So setting himself up for some Trans-Siberian runs. He has the JHU, and the BCR already. Um, so he's got companies all throughout the map. It's going to be hard for him to lay track for the BCR later in the game potentially. But on the other hand, BCR already has pretty good track. Going to be able to link up with Lhasa late game. Already has access to French Indochina, and very unlikely for him to be tokened out anywhere. So fine, he's shifted his focus north, and probably that's fine to do. Could take a 40% presidency, but he's locked out of the high pars. He's going to be starting at 80. So, yeah, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't take the 40% presidency here. Permit wise, I guess that's a good reason not to do it. Um, but again, he has all of his track laid for him almost, so he could just take I guess it would be a C permit. Um, which phase are we in? Yeah, maybe just take a C permit, let the JHA lay your track for you for a while, and then take over when the 4+4s come out. He takes a 30% presidency, so maybe takes a CD. I don't think you want a B permit. You don't need it, and it's going to be going away soon. So he takes a BC. All right. Zach Shellman still buying paying shares. Last share for him. XOR buying a JHU. Jay Weiss, 2 shares left for him probably. And he'll buy a checker. Man with many cheeses buying the BZU. Not going to be able to fill his, will not be able to get his second half of his cash just yet. And Jay Weist is buying another JHU. Actually, that's his first, it looks like. Someone else bought that earlier. XOR bot did. Man with many cheeses probably buying his own BZU to get that full float, and does. Everybody should be passing here. This leaves Zach with priority still. So Man with Many Cheeses has a 5-share lead. One of these companies is not running right away, but he is pulling further and further ahead. JHU could buy the first 4 and rust everybody else's 2s. Does that hurt the QSR? That's the only company that hasn't operated yet. Does not have a 2 train, so could do it. Doesn't need to do it. And he's going to just pass for now. So we will see the QSR operating. He is heading up towards JHA, and this is kind of bad news for the BZU potentially. Probably doesn't want to be competing for tokens against the QSR. But he does token in the QS in this slot, and the BZU is going to operate after him. So this actually ends up being bad news potentially for the JHA, who may lose a token here. Not going to be able to block it forever, but it's going to make it harder to run the East-West or Trans-Siberian. And we see the 2s rust. BZU going to be forced to buy a 4 probably, and he's upgrading his home. Does he token in Changchun? Is that how you pronounce it? Gonna pass token. Actually, he tokens in Jlin, so that's bad for the QSR, who's had his run cut. So Man had his choice there. He could have cut the JHA or the QSR, and he decides to cut the QSR. QSR being run by Zach, JHA by JW. So Zach is a little bit ahead of JW, and Man is looking to hurt his nearest competitor, it looks like. I guess this is technically a better city anyways. It has access to Beijing, whereas this one doesn't yet. Buying the first 4 into the next round, first round with no private investors. So we'll be able to move a little bit more quickly. BCR has a fair amount of cash, but just running 1 train now that these 2s have rusted. And track-wise, could head towards Lhasa, but that's a long-term play. It's not going to get him any money until gray. And could look to just be a little bit nasty over here, prevent the winner from getting down into the track lays for the checker. Probably that would be my thought. Gonna get into Taiwan. Taiwan, not a very important revenue center, I don't think. And he's running for 210 actually with holds. Hmm. Again, if you're going to withhold, you want to do that during communism, which actually we are now in. So perfectly fine. Okay. Did he need to withhold? He probably will need to withhold eventually. He had $500, which is not quite enough for a six. So he's basically guaranteed his permanent train with this company, and was going to have to withhold at some point. Might as well withhold before all these tiles get upgraded and you lose out on even more revenue. So perfectly acceptable. He buys a four now, a little bit less acceptable in my mind. No longer has permanent train money. He is gonna run for more, and he can withhold again. So not the end of the world. Hacker, he is kind of laying a random track, and he doesn't place any tokens, running just a three train, withholding as well. So does he buy another four here? He does. So these fours are going pretty quick. Nobody has any cash other than him. So he could hope to snap up a share that nobody else will be able to take, basically. We'll see if JHA wants to buy a four here. Does have the cash for it, um, and may want to do it. Just speeds the game up a little bit. To be fair, I don't think that he really wants to speed up the game very much, so maybe he lets someone else do it. JHA, he links up with the Trans-Siberian, doesn't have a train to run it. Does anybody have a train to run this? No. You're going to need at least four cities. So 4 plus 4 is the minimum train currently. Running for 100 with holding. And does he buy the 4? He does. So we're into the next stock round. He is the only one with cash. Um, Actually, sorry, he's not the only one with cash. His opponent is. So good for Zach, bad for everyone else. He buys a ninja, and everybody else is gonna, well, I guess you could still take stock actions. You're just not gonna be netting yourself any shares, really. He sells a BCR, hurts the presidency a little bit. That is the leader. And he buys his own checker. Checker does have probably a better train than the BCR, so just optimizing his portfolio for the run. In terms of the next stock round, the BCR operates significantly further from where we currently are in operating order than the checker does. So checker is also a safer investment, much more likely to run before the stock round than the BCR does. That said, I think probably the BCR will still run, but it makes sense to buy a share closer to, where you currently are in operating order. It's just a safer investment. I will take an aside here to say that this broker fee thing totally incomprehensible to me why this rule exists. I hate this rule. Whenever I played this game in real life or face to face, I would always forget this rule. It always messed me up, and it just is a real pain in the butt. JW, no money for shares, passing. Man with many cheese, also passing. So it looks like XOR bot has given priority to JW. Quick stock round. JHA does not have a ability to run the east-west either, and he buys a 4 plus 4, so we'll be able to run that in the next operating turn as long as he gets a token that is linked up. Would probably have to lay this as a DIT to run that. First operation of the winner, he is heading south, so again, this could have been blocked more effectively by the BCR player, but now CKR is going to be able to link the winner in right away. Buying a 4 plus 4 and has very little cash. Does have half of his treasury waiting for him, but is going to be unable to token, actually, which is good news for the BCR. I don't know if he did that math to figure that out or if he's just going to get lucky with that. CKR, ton of cash, and actually, yeah, okay. He's running for 170, 270, Itchy pays out. And he also buys a 4 plus 4, so these 4 plus 4s are going fast. In that light, it makes sense to sell the BCR for the CKR, as mentioned. Ninja running 2 chains and upgrading Shanghai does have a token but doesn't have cash for it. Running for 260. And he's withholding. Not going to be enough for another train. JHU, he is upgrading Beijing, going to increase his run a little bit. This also allows you to run through Beijing. So he's going to be able to hit it twice, which is usually pretty lucrative. May want to run the 3 train north and then the 3 plus train down along all these dits, which he is doing. Has a pretty nice run, 280, and he withholds, can pick up a 4+4. 4+4 is not permanent, so if he picks this up, he is speeding the end of communism or the end of the market closure and not securing himself a permanent train. Just going to withhold for now. Okay. QSR, unable to run the east-west and upgrading his home. He's not placing any tokens. I'm surprised that this token has not been laid yet. I was expecting that a long time ago. Running for 280 and he pays. BZU has a 4 train, can also not run the east-west. Could run the east-west if he upgraded this tile with a gentle curve into Harbin. And instead going to upgrade Tianjin. Is he running that track? I suppose he is. Does he token there? He does. So after having complained about nobody tokening there, the players are listening and they snap that up. He has a run of 180 and he's withholding still, so in no rush to get into any of these bonus areas. Actually, it's silly for me to say he's not moving either way, so fair enough, withholding for a permanent train. And doesn't buy any trains. Where are we in terms of the next stock round? I'm going to have to get all the way back to the checker. There are 2 4+4s available, so may see us head all the way over to the checker before the next stock round. BCR, he is upgrading Nanning, only with a 4 train, not going to be running too well. Looks like 250, he's withholding again. A lot of withholding. I wonder if these players are starting to withhold too much. You don't fall back by withholding during communism, obviously, but you're also not getting any cash. So he, for instance, if the next stock round triggers, is not going to be picking up any shares and may fall behind a little bit. He was pretty far ahead, but Zach has managed to catch up. Zach, on the other hand, is pretty poor in terms of company treasuries, so may need to withhold later in the game to afford better trains. So maybe he's still ahead. This may be a little bit of a misleading comparison. Regardless, withholding and not buying a train. HKR running 2 trains, has been tokened out of Beijing and not actually laying any track, running for 370, which he withholds again. Lots and lots of withholding. He buys a 4+4. This is going to extend the operating round potentially. I don't know that anybody else is eager to buy a 4+4. Train limit, I think, is 3 still, right? It is, and will be for at least 1 more rank of trains. So this company can't buy it. This company probably doesn't want to. BCR could, but he just operated, so probably won't. BZU could pick up a 4+4. Yeah, I think that we'll probably see this last 4+4 get exported, which means that everybody's going to be running again. So we talked about the choice between the checker and the BCR ends up maybe not mattering, other than that the checker was running for a lot more, so still probably the right move. JJ, he upgrades Jilin, and running 3 trains, going to have a really monstrous run of 550. Still unable to take advantage of the Trans-Siberian, but looks like he is at least hitting Beijing, so that's good. Winner, second operation, does have a 4+4, but no money for a token. He links up with all this pre-existing track and doesn't have the greatest run because he's still having to hit his home city. Paying for 160. Checker, 3 trains on the other hand, is going to have a pretty monstrous run and he is not paying any track or tokening. Sorry, I thought he had 3 trains. He just has 2 plus trains, and he's running for 510 with those. NJR upgrading for access into Beijing, and he is running for 300, which he withholds again, so even more withholding. Does have money for the 4+4. I do not think he should buy it though, and he does not. JHU upgrading a city for a few extra bucks, and he's running for 340, which he pays. He really needs to pay on some of his companies because he was pretty cash poor into the next stock round if he didn't. QSR running 2 trains. I think this is the company that I thought was going to be able to run the Trans-Siberian, but ultimately is going to need to upgrade. No, sorry. The BZU is the company I was expecting to run the Trans-Siberian. So even with an upgrade here, the QSR is not going to be able to do it. Upgrading Changchun and not tokening anywhere. Has been tokened out in a number of places, so his runs are all diced up. And he's running for only 270, which he pays. BZU, does he upgrade here for the Trans-Siberian? I don't know why you wouldn't. Huh. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing. Would have a much better run, I think. Um, he's running for 190. If he hit the Trans-Siberian, this is 30, 60, 80, 100, and 60 plus 50. So it's only $20 more. But still, we were just saying that he was kind of cash poor. A few extra bucks could go a long way. Pays out for 190. And where are we towards the next stock round? Going to happen on the hacker. There is one 4+4 left, and I don't think that the BCR wants it. Could have bought one before now, so we may see the next stock round started by Zach Shillman. BCR does lay a tile, just upgrading his run. He's going to be paying for 160, or 260, which he pays out, and he does not buy the 4+4. So we will see a stock round after this operation. Hacker, he is running 3 trains. Does secure a token in Beijing, so can double tap Beijing. He's going to have a really nice run if he does. 630, really, really good for him. And he pays that out. So just taking stock of the game state, Man is technically leading still, closely followed by Zach. Zach has the QSR hacker. QSR and hacker both don't have money for permanent trains, so we'll have to withhold. And I think we'll be seeing communism end here. So missed his opportunity to get permanent trains. Probably a little bit ahead, a little bit behind Man, just running on borrowed time here when we account for that. Jay Weist is technically in last place, has the JHA and Ninja. Ninja, I don't think it has the greatest track currently. That's okay, actually. So doing okay there. And then the JHA, almost always a good company, has 3 trains. Doesn't have money for a permanent train, though. So he's going to be in trouble when this 6 comes out and that 3 rests. So he's trailing Man almost certainly. Xorbot has been kind of trailing the whole game. Has had some really nice runs for the checker. But yeah, it's going to be locked in the south, I think, and maybe too far behind at this point. JW could float another company here. He has the JHA and the NJR. Which companies would be attractive? These Beijing companies still have some potential. They've been tokened out of important tracks to the north, but do still have access through this city here to head south. And always having access to Beijing is always going to ensure you some decent revenue. So could look to float a company. If you're going to float a company, you probably want to float it soon. When these $80 pars run out, you're going to be stuck with 70, and you're going to have very expensive trains staring down the track towards you. So need to par soon if you're looking to par at all. He's going to buy a hacker. Hacker has 3 trains. One of them is going to be rusting very soon. Man is buying his own BCR. So he's a believer in his company. BCR is probably going to end up with 6 train. 6 train is not the best. Um, and he's going to be running from Lhasa to French Indochina ultimately. So maybe a little bit of an underwhelming run. Zach Chillman, he is buying the hacker as well. Hacker is unlikely to run again that 3 train. Very unlikely. So while this company has excellent revenue right now, it's going to be a lot less attractive in just a moment. XOR, he is buying the winner, so just looking to get the rest of his treasury, I think. Where is the winner? Yes, needs another share there before he gets his other half of his float. JW, buying a JHA, another company with 3 trains that needs to be careful that it operates. So it will operate before the 6 comes out at least. Hacker is unable to bring out the 6. So reasonable to invest your money there. Man with many cheeses. He's rapidly approaching his cert limit. May want to par a 4th company to exceed the cert limit even harder and just run away with this game on share density. A 40% presidency late in the game is pretty good because you only need a D permit anyways. So if he were to do that, maybe he wants to pick up the LHR and just link up with the BCR real quick. That would not be unreasonable. Could also look at the Annex R. Would be a little bit harder to link up, but may have a better chance of getting into Beijing and then also down into the BCR track. So we'll see if we see that. He spent a lot of his cash, so probably won't do it during this stock round. Zach Chillman, he is buying a hacker. XOR bot buying his last winner. Well, not his last winner, but enough of the winner to get it some cash. JW buying a BCR. This company might float up, and looks like it will. It was sold once, so I thought it was sold by XORBot. I think we did see that, so I'm surprised that it's still at the ceiling of the market. Not sure how that happened. I must be missing something. Zach Shulman, also floating the hacker, XORBot, buying a JHA, and everybody other than these last 2 players should be passing here. JHA floating, XOR buying his own checker, maybe looking to float that. All these companies are at the ceiling, so I say they're floating, but they're not actually floating. Buying the Quasar and a JHU. So Zach Shulman, last one with money, and can only afford the BZU or the NJR. He will buy the NJR and give priority to XOR. Into the next stock round, probably the last time we're going to be seeing this 3 run. Winner, where is it? Does not have cash for a 6, could withhold to bring it out. We are still in the closed market. May want to do that to prevent all these other 3 trains from running. Of course, he has a 3 train in the checker, so maybe shuffles and then brings out the 6. No, he doesn't have a 3. Yeah, so no reason not to bring out the 6. He is upgrading Qingdao and running 3 trains. He's going to pay for 640, it looks like. Winner, be curious to see if he brings out the 6 here or not. He is laying some expensive track and looking to get into Beijing next operating round. He pays out, so we will not see the 6, at least not just yet. The checker also is not at his cert limit, so could withhold for the 6 here as well. And he's running for 530, which he pays. Ninja, maybe the Ninja will bring it out. Will rust his own 3 train, but yeah, I'm not sure. The other thing to consider with the 6 is that you're not only rusting trains, you're also reopening the market. So may not be in their interest to open up the market for another player. I will say that if the winner had brought out the 6, then the checker would have been the first company to be able to move to the right. So maybe that would have made a little bit more sense than with just sitting on the current state. Ninja, on the other hand, would be opening the market up for the leader, so a little bit less attractive in that sense. He is running south from Beijing. He runs 2 trains for 310 and withholds. So I think he is bringing out the 6 here. Okay. Russ the 3 trains. Um, one in the JHU, one in the QSR, one in the hacker. So hurting the JHU and the QSR, who are not going to be able to run their 3 compared to the other players, but he has at least opened up the market, which I'm sure they'll be grateful for. JHU now. He is laying track that may eventually upgrade to get him into Russia. Um, Not entirely sure. I'm still surprised that we haven't seen this track upgraded. And he's going to be running for 200, which he pays out now that we're out of communism. And he can also pick up a 6, which he may want to just do, secure some of these cheap permanents. He does. QSR, he is upgrading his route. Actually, he's not probably even running that route. Does he have the ferry? It's Zach. Zach does have the ferry. Okay. Otherwise, I'd be surprised to see him not bypassing this. May still want to bypass this. It's only a $30 city. Running for 160. And he pays that out. Not able to afford a permanent train. So he's going to have to do some shuffling or withholding to afford a permanent train for his company. And now that we're out of communism, that's going to hurt him. BCU with a 4 train. He is not sure where he's going with that. Maybe looking to get a run all the way down from Beijing into Russia later in the game. He withholds. That's painful. Buying a 6, I assume. Yep. And the BCR now could pick up the last 6. So will he end up with 3 6 trains? One in all of his companies? Potentially. The withhold out of communism does hurt a little bit, but that company is trailing anyways. Going to take it a long time to get into the bonus rounds or bonus areas of the market. So not the end of the world. 3 6 trains, is that good? It pressures the other players, so I guess it's not terrible um, if you have the track to run it. Can lay into Lhasa here. Instead, going to be just upgrading one of these brown cities. The problem he's going to run into with a 6 is that he has a ton of dits that he may be running. So his 6 train run is going to be Lhasa, Chengdu, this dit, which is 3 stops, and then these 3 stops. All right, so just one dit, not the end of the world for him. And he pays and buys a 6. That triggers a stock round. That was a very fast set of operations. Everybody has cash. Man is cert locked, so would have to sell. Could sell the JHA, no cash and no permanent trains, and then look to take a 40% presidency. I think that's probably the move. There are still opportunities for cheaper permanent trains, and exceeding your cert limit is going to be very important, I think. He's not that far ahead at this point. Still ahead technically, but not as far ahead as he could be. Xorbot, similar calculus for him. He's trailing in shares a lot. So doesn't have to start a presidency to invest his money, but may want to do that just to deny it to one of these other players that really need it. He's going to buy a checker. This company, no permanent trains, but does have a fair amount of cash. JHU being bought, and this is the question, does he sell out to par? Zach Chillman may also want to sell out to par. Instead passing. All right, so sitting on the JHA shares, let's evaluate that for a minute. JHA has 2 trains, neither of them permanent, is going to be withholding. Does have decent track, both north and south, as it has the Beijing token. So not a terrible company, but if I'm looking at this company, I say we're looking at some withholds or falling back when these trains rust. So I'm not eager to hold it. Plus, selling it down hurts your nearest competitor, second nearest competitor's net worth. And then you can get potentially 4 shares for your 2 shares. actually even more than that. So yeah, I think that it's probably safer to start another company here. Parred at 80, you're going to be able to afford even an 8 train without having to go out of pocket. Whereas you wait, you may be stuck with a $70 company and even more expensive trains. So I think this is a miss. Zach, one share left unless he pars, and he'll buy a Ninja. XOR just going to be gradually reaching his cert limit, buying these cheap companies. The Ninja presidency is under fire here. Jay Weist is going to have to defend. It has two permanent trains. I missed that it ended up with two sixes. That's pretty crazy. So Jay Weist is certainly going to defend this company, but he's going to end up with a split presidency. Man with many cheeses. So again, if you're not going to float a company, why not go for these shares? They're cheap and they're going to be playing. They're going to be paying well with two permanent trains. Zach Gelman probably buying another Ninja here. He sells his own Accuser and buys the Ninja. XOR could pick up the last one, in which case this can be a split presidency. Real bad news for the Jay Weist player. So he does. Jay Weist just working towards his cert limit with a BZU. Another company with a permanent train. Man with many cheeses says, um, just gone to sleep for the stock round, and maybe potentially abdicating his position as the lead player if he's not careful. XOR will hit a cert limit and is buying a BZU. Jay Weist continuing to buy BZU. It looks like those are, well, there are other shares available, but this is running two trains and has pretty reasonable track. We'll be getting the Trans-Siberian bonus finally. Zach is passing, XOR, BZU, and Jay Weist, BZU. So floating up, and everybody's at their cert limit now. This leaves Man with priority. Maybe he foresaw this and realized that he could float in the next stock round. Um, I don't know if that's a really predictable outcome, though. Maybe giving him too much credit there. BCR, not going to be buying any trains. Already bought the 6. HKR running 2 trains, paying for 530. JHA, he is upgrading this tile again just for a few extra dollars. And JHA cannot get the Trans-Siberian. He only has a 4+4. Paying for 530. Winner, $500. He is passing track. It does have a token. Could lay that somewhere to potentially hurt the BCR. But actually, the BCR's runs are secure, so really not able to hurt him. I don't think the BCR is ever going to be running up along the East Coast, and the token on whatever this city is, Kuming, would not be of any value. So BCR is safe. He does token Kuming, probably has a better run now, but this doesn't hurt his opponent. Running for 250, which he actually withholds. This does give him the ability to buy a 6E. 6E in the south here is probably pretty good. He can ignore all these dits and just hit all these high revenue centers. So, okay, fair enough. This rusts the 3+3s, and it is the winner that is doing this. So, does that hurt the checker? It does. He's rusting his own trains. Hurts the JHU and the Ninja. So, hurts himself as much as it hurts the other players, really. But it does change the share limit, so that's interesting. That hurts everybody with 3 trains as well. Okay. Hacker and JHA have already run, though, so they're not probably too upset about this. Well, I'm sure they're upset about it. This was a train that they could have run otherwise, but at least they got their runs of it before this happened. So 2-4 trains being discarded, and the checker running a 4+4 as his 3+ has rusted. He is just running for 250, which he actually has to withhold. He can buy another 6E, which, as noted, he's running the same track with both of his companies probably, is pretty good down in that southwest corner. So he does buy the 6E. This is a lot of the cheaper permanent trains now gone. So going back to our earlier discussion of whether or not to float in that last stock round, may have made sense to do that because these cheap permanents are going to be rapidly evaporating. NJR. Actually, there's a bunch of trains left, so we're not approaching another stock round just yet. NJR upgrading and running just one train for 230. JHU, um, just looking at the track for a moment, has been tokened out south. Could look to lay the double O to start heading south, but is he really motivated to do so? Um, I don't know. The revenue centers down here are going to be hard to reach with a 6, and there's a lot of low value cities in the way. So instead, just putting a 6 slot DIT there. And what is his run going to look like? Kind of underwhelming, 300, and that's with the bonus. QSR, actually falling back trainless, that's painful. And upgrading the Trans-Siberian route, buying the 6E, there's 2 of those left, I believe. At least he didn't have to, he did out of pocket, but he didn't have to sell shares to do it. So that hurts everyone invested in that company, which is just him. Yeah, that's bad news. Is he in last place? I think he probably is at this point, right? Actually, he's in second, huh? But he's in danger. He doesn't have permanent trains in his other company either and has no cash. So I think it goes back to what we were saying. He was kind of man with many cheeses, nearest competitor, but he was living on borrowed time. He didn't prepare himself appropriately for the permanent trains. Operating the BZU, probably the first time we're seeing the Trans-Siberian. Only going to be running it once. With better trains, could potentially double tap with the way the track has arranged itself. But finally, we'll see this. And he is upgrading down south, maybe looking to help his other company, the JHU, eventually. And not sure where this track is going to eventually go. Maybe down to Lhasa, but it's going to be very expensive to get down there. Paying for 440 with the Trans-Siberian. Great news for him. Operating his second company now. Where is the train marker? It's far away. So we probably will see these last 2 6Es just get exported. Nobody really has cash for them. So I think he's going to be able to run his companies and then go into the next stock round, potentially float for 80 and then snap up a quick, what is it, an A train? An A train, yeah. All right, we're heading towards the end of the game here. Been a long time coming. BCR, he is heading up towards the winner, so he is eventually going to be getting into Beijing, it looks like. And running 2 trains, he's running for 460. He had a little bit of a stall in terms of his, revenue increasing, but he is back in the game now. I'm surprised the BCR still has a permit. Are we still in C? We are. Wow. So he's not going to have much track left in the game for him. Maybe the last track lays for the BCR. Running 2 trains in the hacker, he is not laying any track and running for 540, paying that out. JHA, he is upgrading out west and running 2 trains for 620. He also is getting a Trans-Siberian, so we're seeing all the companies taking advantage of that now. How is he doing that? Which token does he have? Oh, he has this random token on Russia. So I poo-pooed that token, but he is ultimately able to take advantage of it. I will point out that this BCR token down here has ended up being very underwhelming. Winner running 2 trains. It is a 6E, so he should have a pretty darn good run with all these dits. Oh, sorry, I was misunderstanding. The 4+4 is the one that's hitting all the dits. The 6E is going to ignore it. So he's running for 490, pays that out. He is still, I think, not in the bonus zone. Not quite. So running less than most of the other companies. Checker, running probably the same route. Going to be a real circuitous route here. And running for 500, which he pays. Ninja, running a 6 train, does have a token in Beijing, and looks like the 00 has finally been upgraded. We'll see who gets a token there. Not going to be the Ninja. And he is running for just 230. That's pretty bad. For some reason, didn't the Ninja have 2 permanent trains? He must have bought it over into one of his other companies, J Weast. So is the JHA running a 6 that didn't have before? Um, where am I looking here? So it does have a 6. All right. So he realized he was splitting this presidency and didn't want to have the 6 train revenue going to Zach Choman and bought it into his other company, it looks like. He's paying out 230. JHU, he is upgrading Wuhan, so he has linked the BCR up into Beijing, and he does have a token, so could look to token on the BCR tile here and cut the runs of the checker and the winner, also securing the JHU's runs for some time. The checker does have a token, so he could counterplay with a token on Wuhan if he does that, which would hurt both the BCR and the JHU, but not the end of the world to bypass Wuhan in reality. So, and actually the JHU doesn't have money for the token, so ignore me. Running for 250, 300, and he pays that out. QSR 6E can hit the Trans-Siberian now. The 6E train is not the best train to be doing it with, I don't think. So he has 5, yeah, he can hit it. But a 6E, you probably wanted something better than that for. He's running for 250, pretty unimpressive. Sole investor in that company. And we do enter stock round 9. So 8 trains are available. Man with many cheeses needs to sell and float a company here, I would say, with a 40% presidency. And instead, it's just passing. He's only $200 ahead of Zach Chillman. Zach has a company with no money and no trains, so he's further ahead than it looks, but still, why is he sitting on the JHA? This train is going to be rusting eventually, and you have the opportunity to push the game along. I think there's still viable companies to float. They're not going to have the best runs at first, but for instance, the NXR wouldn't have a hard time getting into Beijing and then north of Beijing potentially. So has some pre-made runs for it. Even the LHR, maybe a slower start, maybe not the best choice. Um, but with priority and all this cash, why are you sitting on these JHA shares? I don't get it. Zach, passing as well. XOR, passing. And Jay Weiss, passing. So nobody does anything. Um, hmm. All right. I think that some of these players had incentive to do something there. I'm not going to go through it in depth, but I'm surprised everybody passes. BZU. He is upgrading the 00, so it merges, and he's running for 440. Let me just look at the spreadsheet for a moment. We haven't looked at this that much this game. So it's a little bit less useful in 1880 than it is in 1830 family games because you can't tell that all the companies have operated. So looking at the delta or the trajectory of each player is much harder. It looks like man with many cheeses is potentially running for slightly less than Zach Chill, and he's really not that far ahead of Zach Chillman. So again, I'm really surprised that he's just sitting on those shares. BCR $40 could lay into Lhasa. I think we are still not technically into gray though. We are not. An A train has to be bought first. So he's gonna lay a token north of Beijing. And is he actually hitting Beijing now? He probably can. He has a 6 train. And he is. So he's running for 560, pretty nice. Most of this is because of the bonus at this point. He's so far right that he's the first player to get that $15 bonus. The HKR, 2 trains. Again, he's in danger in this company. Running for 590. JHA, he's not laying any track. And running for 670. I'll note that the current leader is a minority investor in this company. Winner, he is also not laying any track and running for 510, which he pays. So let's pause for a second and just look. Is anybody in a position to bring out this 8? No. So we will see a stall here. We will probably see the 8s exported, um, which is going to rust the 4s. Bad news for the hacker and man with many cheeses who's running 2 of them. And it looks like nobody is willing to shake up this game state. Um, I am very surprised we didn't see any companies float. Nobody's going to be able to push trains, and we're going to see a slow stock round here. It's going to take all the way to the QSR, it looks like. So all the companies are just going to run once, and these trains will export. Running for 620, and nobody's even laying any track. Um, we are still in the C permits, so there are companies that could lay track, but they're not interested in doing so. Running for 240, and he pays that out. JHU, also not laying any track, and running for 260, paying out for 310. QSR, is he the last company to operate? Yes. So very boring stock round, very minimal track development, no trains being bought, and that all comes back to nobody floating a company. 6E, he is laying track at least. He lays it here, looking to bypass the tokens here and run south. He is running a 6E, so he can run all over the map now and hit all the highest revenues basically. And he's running for 340, which he pays out. So we are in the end game now, final stock round, and 8Es are available. I think you probably want to pick those up early and rust everybody's 4+4s if you're a man with many cheeses. I don't think you have a single 4+4. You do not. And other players are, all the other players do. So let's say you float at 80. You'll out of pocket for $100 an 8E, and you'll be able to rust everybody's 4+4s. The BZU doesn't have one. Okay. The one thing I was thinking about is maybe the reason why they're not eager to float a company is because you can only get your second half of the treasury if you hit 50% of shares sold. That said, with a 40% presidency, you're guaranteed to be able to do it. So I don't think that's an actual consideration. Man with many cheeses, narrowly in the lead. 2 players closely following him. XOrbot in last place, which I think has been the case the entire game. So I'm not saying he's going to do it. He's failed to do it twice already, but if I'm him, I'm looking at another company. Passing. XOR, last place, probably motivated to change this up a little bit. But unfortunately, he has 4+ trains, so if he buys a train, he's going to be hurting himself. And he's just selling out of the Ninja and buying a paying share, so he's also not floating. Looks like everybody else. Okay, so Zach is finally gonna see the light, so to speak. And what is he floating? He instead is just buying paying shares as well. The winner, everybody's looking at the winner. Let me find it. It does have 2 trains running for 520, which is pretty darn good. But it's not the highest revenue in the game. I guess it's the highest revenue available. Okay, none of this has any effect at all on the leader. It hurts Jay Weist's net worth, and also hurt Zach Chillman since he sold after XOrbot, but not hurting the net worth of the player in first. So winner looks like it's going to be sold out. And it is now sold out. Zach Chillman actually sold so many shares that he's not going to hit his cert limit and is going to have to buy his own QSR, which is only marginally better than the Ninja, which he sold out of. So everybody's at their cert limit again. I guess maybe Man with Many Cheeses is loath to sell the JHA because it's getting this high bonus, but I think it's worth it to start another company and just hurt everybody else by doing so. Well, Anyway, this is going to be a boring end to the game, I think. Nobody looks like they're parring any companies, and nobody can afford these expensive permanents. So we're just going to see them export over the next three operating rounds, and the game will end. I think Man with Many Cheeses has this all locked up. Um, and most of these companies don't have permits once we are in the gray. Um, and actually, I don't think you can even lay track now that the 8 has exported. So it's just going to be um, three turns of running trains. Does anybody have money for tokens? Tokens are twice as expensive, so even the checker doesn't have money. Um, Nobody has money for tokens. Nobody can lay track. Um, Man with Many Cheeses is $500 ahead and has reasonable routes. I think he's won this. Why don't we skip to the end of this um, first go around? I actually don't know what this button's going to do, if it's going to take us all the way to the end game or not. Um, but I think he's got it. I don't think there's much left in this game to watch, so let's do it. Um, Looking at the spreadsheet for a moment, did that just take us? It may have just taken us to the top of this round. Um, so the train is going to export on the QSR, and I don't think we missed anything. Let's do this again. Did we miss a stock round? So a train exported. Stock rounds are done, sorry. And looking at the spreadsheet, Man with Many Cheeses is running for just marginally less than Jay Weist. XORBot technically is running for the most, but he's so far behind, he's not going to be able to take the game. So we can just skip to the end at this point. Um, and we have two operating rounds left, it looks like. Looking at the spreadsheet, um, Man with Many Cheeses is actually operating ahead of everybody else, and he's still net worth leader. So this game's over. He won the game. Okay. Um, so he secures the win. He is the BCR president. I think that the BCR president oftentimes does win. I don't have statistics to back that up, but it is a pretty strong company. So not surprised to see that. A little bit surprised to see the Rocket player end up in third. Usually pretty good company to be the president of the company that owns the rocket. But again, he got so far behind in the beginning because he operated behind the BCR, and the BCR player played really well. Um, Jay Weist and Zach Shillman, um, I don't I don't have much to say about their play in this game. They didn't stand out to me. Um, I was surprised that nobody floated another company late in the game, but at the end of the day, Man with Many Cheeses was the one that I thought had the most incentive to do it in terms of exceeding his cert limit, and he wins anyways. So can't fault him for just skating to victory. I will say that just a comment on the game 1880, not the specific game in particular. The end of this game was extraordinarily boring, and I think that tends to be the case. The last three runs are just basically a catch-up mechanism, but nobody's laying any track, and it's just you know min-maxing your route or buying that last train basically. Um, so I hope that this commentary was entertaining. 1880 is not my favorite game for a number of reasons, and it being quite long, we're now over 2 hours. Um, I don't know how many more commentaries we'll do of this game. We'll probably do one or two more just to see what variability there is and show you that. But yeah, just not my favorite. The game does do a lot of interesting things. The variable stock rounds is unique to this game as far as I know, and a very cool idea. But a lot of the rest of the game I don't particularly enjoy. The um, the rule in particular that annoys me is that -5 value when you sell shares really trips me up, and I don't see the purpose of it. Minor point, but it is frustrating to me. Um, well, thanks for listening. We have set a new record in terms of video length, and we will be back in the future with additional commentary on games.